Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to be able to speak to you today. Maybe you kick off with a brief introduction to this film. I mean, quite a hard one to summarize, and certainly not for the faint-hearted. But for people who don't know anything about it, can you just give them a bit of a glimpse of what they can expect?
Well, I mean, it's definitely one of those movies that you will leave with an intense reaction one way or the other, like it or not. It's a movie that I would say you have to invest in as a viewer. Like you really have to commit to the runtime and I just feel like as a filmmaker and as a film lover, especially horror, it's kind of the type of movies I respond to. So it deals with family trauma, religion, a lot of the things that make for a great Southern Gothic, I guess you would say, tale or
Mm.
campfire story.
And amazingly, it's the first screenplay from Robert Allen Dilts, and it feels very kind of dense. There's so many different ideas in there, and also highly original. So, what spoke out to you when you first read that script, and why do you think it was going to work so well as a film?
I mean, for me, it was definitely the unique structure and the unpredictability about where I was going. And initially, Robert had sent me, I think it was anywhere between 10, 20 pages as he was writing it. And I was just kind of enthralled and fascinated. He writes very rich characters. It doesn't read like a novel because the screenplay, it's very he's just very visceral with his the way he writes. And so I've always gravitated to his screenplays that he's written in the past and they're always sent to me. And this one just was taking me on a journey that I didn't expect. And by the time the first third of the script was done, I was very rattled. And there's a significant scene that happens, and then it changes gears. And I just told him to keep writing because I was in. And by the time he had finished that script, I said I wanted to make this next, and spent 5 6 years ups and downs, financing falling apart, back and forth, the whole indie film thing that you have to do. Um, and so by the time it got made, that script had evolved even more to where it is today. So it's kind of always ends up a blessing.
Mm. And I hope it doesn't sound like I'm being negative, but it is
No.
quite kind of unrelentingly dark. And each time you sort of think you know where you are with it, it kind of takes you down another deeper pathway in some ways. And kind of, but is there, trying to think of why you would want to make a film that kind of goes like that? Because it's almost the way trauma can work and the way things can be layered, and how deep does the rabbit hole kind of go. So were you ever kind of intimidated by how dark it goes, or what did you want to say with a film that has that kind of sensibility to it?
Definitely. I mean, you're not wrong in the sense that it has this sort of ominous dread throughout. And when I had first read it, I was like, this is a horror movie. Regardless of everything, I felt I wanted to sort of execute it as if it was as well. So using the score to help bridge that and to really let the audience know, like, yeah, we may be going on these other tangents and chapters and stuff, but you were going to end in one place. And I wanted um to kind of deliver something that I thought was grounded and scarier because it felt more in human nature, and it wasn't your sort of ghost story monster. It didn't rely so much on that as much as it did the characters' actual relatable experiences. And I don't mean relatable for everybody. I just mean it's grounded in a human nature, and that's probably all too common in trauma. And we can all relate to trauma in one way or another. So I thought that alone, the sort of that sensibility was going to at least get people to invest in the time to watch it, and also probably to walk away with this movie lingering for a while with them, because it does propose a lot of questions. It doesn't really wrap things up. And it's not a slasher horror. So at the time when I initially tried to get this going, it was sort of around the time right before this sort of renaissance of a new type of horrors were coming out, like the Babadook or It Follows, The Witch. those films, or even Hereditary, like very popular films that started coming out. So I knew I was on the right track with this sort of psychological mind fuck. Sorry if I don't
No.
swear. Psych bleep it out, or but it's what it was. And I was all in. I grew up very much with loving great parents, amazing family, so I don't have that to relate to, but maybe that's just a form of expression I was gravitated to. Like you burst as a filmmaker, and it just was something I was really, really dedicated to executing this movie the way the script was written.
And you've got such an incredible cast, which I think must have been crucial because you've got all these different chapters. And because they give such strong performances, you almost feel like, each section could have been its own film because there's a real depth of character there. And, in Kelly and Nick and Scott, but particularly Robert Patrick. I mean, that performance in the first section, there's some incredibly chilling moments. So, what was it like working with this cast and particularly Robert Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, I knew this movie lives and dies by the performances, without a doubt. As good as the script is, if you get the wrong person to play Thomas, this movie crumbles. Same with the rest, but Thomas particularly was one role I was concerned about without, overdoing certain elements of his character. I thought, like, God, like it really is important to do this right. And I had attached Scott Hayes very early on, like in 2015. And so in talking to him, I knew, he was going to nail this. Um, and yeah, somebody like Kelly, who came on late in the game, like while we were in pre-production, we had offered her the role. And, it was interesting how all four of them had blue eyes and really looked like they could be related. Um, and, just all of them. Nick, I'd heard he was back to acting for about a year. And something that was in the script, that Eli's character was a little more of a small town Adonis, very much confident in his body and shredded, and a little more of an edge and attitude towards him that was more confident. That shifted when I looked at Nick, and I'm like, I don't know if that Eli in the script people would have rooted for or gone along with that sort of redemption journey based on that character's flaws. And Nick brings, in every movie he does, this sort of gentle, a little more like sweet, you almost feel for him a bit more. And I knew it just kind of changed my direction with that character a bit, because it was pivotal that you connected to Eli and at least go, man, this guy's screwed up, but there's something about him, like I want to root for him. um and the patriarch, Mr. Robert Patrick, this guy, you know, we had gone over the years to a few other actors. One of them was Michael Parks, and he had attached to the film. Unfortunately, he passed away, but um, and the movie had kind of fallen apart back then. But a lot of these actors, whether they could have loved the script, but they had a few issues with, like, there's certain scenes in the movie that they were like, look, I I love this script. I can go there, but I don't want to go there. So, and I can't tell you to change it because it's necessary for the story. And something I was really passionate about that. And so when we got to Robert, sure enough, he obviously had his hesitations and was reluctant, because I feel like the script in the wrong hands could be, you could stylize it in a different way and it could just be a different movie. And I think all of them wanted to make sure that they're in good hands, because it's important how you execute those sort of darker scenes. And so we got on the phone, and Robert was very complimentary, but he wanted to see my previous movie and showed it to him. And then he called me right after. He's like, all right, we're going to do this. And what I can say about all these actors is that they come very, very prepared. They know these small movies, you don't get a lot of rehearsal time, if any. And so they do a lot of their work in pre-production, and I trust in that. Like, I vet out actors a lot before I want to go to them, because it's so critical. One, that they're easygoing and they come on this for the film and are going to ride it out with you. Um, and they all did. And that's something I'm so grateful for, because it shows in their performances. And you know. I will say Jake Weber is an actor that he is the most technically pro actor I've ever dealt with. He was in playing Boone, he had that monologue and we'd get a take done and he would go, "Are we marrying to that take?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, that's the one." And he'd go, "Okay, I lit the cigarette at this point, I put my feet up here." He knew everything he did
Mm.
in every moment. And I've never experienced that with an actor. Usually they're like, "Well, I'll do it if it makes sense or I feel it." No, he was like, "I know how continuity goes. If that's the take, I don't want it to be screwed up in the edit." So there's just they're all different and lovely people. So I'm lucky.
I think I'm almost out of time, but I definitely wanted to pick up on kind of the look and feel of the film, which I feel is
Sure.
incredibly distinctive and kind of, yeah, that American gothic kind of sensibility and kind of the darkness of it, the soundtrack. And I thought it was interesting, yeah, picking up on the way it kind of maybe fits within this sort of wave of, you know, these slow burn psychological horrors. So did you take inspiration from other films, and what did you want to do with the look and feel of it, which is going to add to the story?
Yeah, I think, like I said before, in terms of the score, I knew that was going to bridge the chapters in a way to tell the audience, like, you're going to go back to a place where this is a horror movie, and you will reap the benefits of a horror at the end of this. And I felt the score and Robert Pisior's, work there really did that, and we had a lot of that prepared in terms of how we were going to do it in pre-production. Um, Carlos Ritter, who shot the film, I'd never worked with him before. He had never shot a feature film before, as far as I remember. I think this was his first film, but he had a huge body of work in commercials and some TV. And I was just blown away. I couldn't believe this guy, his body of work was so beautiful and it just fit the type of bleak tone but that's also beautiful. I always find that sort of one source lighting and um that sort of cinematography is fit for this movie. A lot of the shadows and things that are down the hallways kind of fall out to darkness. But I definitely learned, quite a bit more about how production design, costume, and cinematography are all very much in sync and sort of get into your subconscious on a level that even as a filmmaker, you're not quite aware till you see the movie. And I'm like, wow, they were really dialed in and in sync. And that sort of really there's a you really retain this dread as a viewer, and that comes from that place, I feel like, of a combination of the work of all aspects in the film, not just the cast. It's everything sort of doing that. The location setting, like the first chapter being in the farmland, it feels like you're back in time, which was something we wanted it to feel like. Well, what time period is this? Is this in the is this a period piece? And until you see it's not, that subconsciously think gets into Thomas's character, that how the past was in that first chapter. So it all kind of just worked out in a way where sometimes as a filmmaker you don't even know until it's done.
Mm. And just finally, you know, what do you hope that people take away from watching it? Kind of mentioning at the beginning how is kind of these layers of trauma, and but you know, maybe watching a film like this, is there some sense of catharsis kind of going on, you know, being so immersed in it, and by the end, you know, can you get to the end, can you cope with it, but you come out the other side, and you feel like maybe, yeah, you take something with you about it, and then it does hit on all these other issues as well. One of the things I was thinking, a lot of kind of social issues and the deprivation, you know, things like addiction, and how trauma can manifest itself in people's lives. It's definitely
Yeah,
not brought
I mean,
out.
I can just say the biggest thing I was fascinated about were those sort of themes. How religion can be used to manipulate somebody who's vulnerable. Thomas having just lost his mother and been dealing with that for 20 years on this farmland. The parenting, how are these people supposed to function in a normal life? And so that was a big thing, like seeing where these characters are 20 something years later, where they are, and how they've dealt with it. And it's sort of how trauma, you can never cure that. It's managed, it's never cured. um and so those were themes that I just wanted to explore, and definitely are catharsis. Like, you know I can't speak for a viewer on what they're going to take from this, other than feeling like they need to maybe take a shower, and maybe there's things they've gone through that are too close to home. I don't know about that, but I expect so, and I expect some people just this isn't their cup of tea. But I feel like if you invest in this movie, then you will feel something. And for moviegoers, I feel like it's harder and harder to come up with films that are original and unique that you can leave with, whether it's scared, horrified, crying from laughter, in all these kind of movies. For this particular one, it's a bleak one for me, and it does explore those important themes, um, in human nature. And I will say that one of the other fascinating things is people trying to figure the movie out in the ending on you can have Josiah could have two totally different motives, agendas behind what he's doing, and completely different. Is this guy a fundamentalist all of a sudden that really believes in this sort of radical biblical way of atonement? Or is this another purpose via manipulation and religion to get what he wants done, for more insidious purposes? Like, so there's two definite narratives that you can go, no, this is the way it is, and it's dark, and it's an angry God kind of thing, and they're right. Or is this sort of, not that and something else? And that is fascinating to me, because I don't think either of them are necessarily wrong. And
Mm,
it kind of leaves people hopefully talking about that aspect of it, because
mm,
that's what really, I would say I'm inspired by things like that. I would say in like a movie like The Shining, that was interesting to me always was, it's sort of in a mental capacity, is this mental health, this man losing his mind. But who opened that door to the freezer to let him out? It throws one wrench in there for the supernatural, but is it super? So I like that kind of screwing with the audience here and there. And I feel like we did a little of that kind of manipulation to our viewer, enough to go to explore it more. Maybe it's hard to want to see that movie again, maybe, but to really, if you do look back, you can see a lot of the things that were set up.
mm. And just super quickly, do you know what you're going to be working on next? Is it another horror or something different?
Yes, I do know what I'm working on next. We're actually in pre-production. We're shooting in October-ish in Kentucky. And it's a departure. It's not horror. It's a drama comedy. I would say in the spirit of something like The Wrestler, but with more humor. Um, so yeah, a little lighter than this one. I needed to do something that some maybe my mom can see and be like, you know, can tell her friends to see. But it's got a lot of heart and emotion to it that I'm really excited to tackle. But that said, I grew up loving horror, and this was my first one, and I had so much fun doing it. I definitely want to get back and do a horror at some point down the road. It was the most fun in terms of executing a movie. That
Mm.
said, the hardest movie I've ever had to do. I had PTSD nightmares for 2 weeks every day after shooting, for 2 weeks. Never had that before.
Definitely intense.
Uh,
So, have a break, do a bit of comedy, come back to horror.
yeah, no, exactly.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, Vincent. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us, and can't wait everyone else to see this incredible film. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Have a good day. Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks. Bye.